The first time I watched Alien, I already knew most of its biggest moments. I knew what the creature looked like, I knew about the chestburster scene, I knew Ripley survived. In theory, knowing all of that should have reduced the film's impact, because after all, horror often depends on surprise. The less you know, the more vulnerable you are to whatever a movie has planned. But what surprises me, even after countless rewatches, is how little that knowledge seems to matter. Alien still feels tense. It still feels uncomfortable. More importantly, it still feels unsettling in a way that many other horror films just don't, even though you're fully aware of what's going to happen. There was never a moment where familiarity makes the experience feel safe. If anything, knowing what was coming almost made certain scenes feel worse, because the film gives you so much time to sit with that knowledge and anticipate the inevitable instead of relying on surprise. Alien seemed to be operating on almost an entirely different kind of fear. That got me thinking about what exactly makes Alien work, because the obvious answer would be the Xenomorph itself, but I don't think that's the whole story. Plenty of horror movies have iconic monsters, plenty of horror movies have shocking deaths, memorable imagery, and scenes that become permanently embedded in popular culture. What Alien has is atmosphere. The film creates a constant feeling that something is wrong long before the creature becomes a serious threat. The Nostromo never has this feeling of being safe. The silence never feels peaceful. Even ordinary conversations seem to carry an underlying sense of unease, as if the film itself is quietly warning you that something terrible is just waiting around the corner. And that's why Alien continues to endure as one of horror's most effective films. It doesn't rely on fear alone. It relies on patience, it relies on anticipation, it relies on slow terror. One of the biggest reasons Alien remains so effective is that the film manages to create discomfort long before the Xenomorph begins hunting anyone. Most horror films establish a rhythm where audiences understand when they're supposed to feel safe and when they're supposed to feel threatened. There are calm scenes where characters regroup, share information, and catch their breath, followed by scenes where the danger returns and the tension spikes again. Alien really operates in that way. From the moment the crew wakes aboard the Nostromo, there is already a strange sense of atmosphere hanging over everything. The ship feels cold, industrial, and strangely lifeless despite being filled with all kinds of people. The corridors stretch endlessly into darkness. The rooms are cluttered with machinery that constantly hums in the background. Pipes run along every wall. Steam occasionally drifts through the frame, even when nothing is happening. The environment feels oppressive in a way that's difficult to fully articulate. The Nostromo doesn't resemble the sleek, optimistic version of the future that many science fiction films were presenting at the time. Instead, it feels worn down, cramped, and vaguely unpleasant to exist inside. It feels like a workplace rather than an adventure, and that realism ends up making the horror far more effective because the audience isn't being placed inside a fantasy, they're being placed inside a believable environment that slowly becomes a nightmare. What makes this especially impressive is how much time Alien spends focusing on the ordinary kind of activities. Characters argue about this or that, they complain about work, they sit around eating meals. On paper, these scenes should provide relief from the tension because nothing threatening is actually happening. Yet somehow the film manages to make even these moments feel uneasy. Part of that comes from Ridley Scott's direction, which constantly emphasizes the size and emptiness of the ship around the crew. Characters are frequently framed against enormous industrial backgrounds that make them appear small and isolated. Part of it comes from the lighting, which rarely allows the Nostromo to feel warm or welcoming. But perhaps most of the important factors are surrounded by the sound design. The ship is never truly silent, yet none of its sounds are comforting. There is always a mechanical presence surrounding the characters. Machinery hums, doors hiss open and shut, engines vibrate somewhere in the distance. the Nostromo feels alive in a strange mechanical sense, but it's not a life that offers comfort. Instead, it constantly reminds viewers that these people are trapped inside a giant machine, floating through an endless void. Long before the Xenomorph arrives, the film has already established a feeling of vulnerability that never fully goes away. And that's ultimately what makes the Nostromo such a crucial part of Alien's horror. The ship isn't merely the setting where scary events occur, it actively contributes to the fear itself. The audience never fully relaxes because the environment never fully allows them to do so. Every corridor feels like a potential hiding place. Every dark room feels suspicious. Every journey from one section of the ship to the other feels slightly uncomfortable because the film has conditioned viewers to expect danger even when none is immediately present. By the time the Xenomorph finally emerges as a genuine threat, the audience has already spent a large portion of the film feeling uneasy. The monster isn't introduced into the story naturally. It stepped into an atmosphere that has been generating fear for almost an hour already. That's why Alien still feels unsettling today. The horror doesn't begin when the creature appears. The horror begins the moment the audience steps aboard the Nostromo. And from that point onward, the film never truly lets them feel safe ever again. What truly separates Alien from many horror films is just how much confidence it has in anticipation. A lot of horror movies are built around immediate threats. They want the audience to see the danger, understand the danger, and start fearing the danger as quickly as possible. Alien takes almost the exact opposite approach. It constantly delays gratification. It constantly postpones the moments audiences are waiting for. Even after Kane encounters the facehugger, the film refuses to immediately descend into utter horror chaos. Instead, it allows a strange period of normalcy to settle over the crew. The immediate crisis appears to have passed. Kane wakes up, he seems healthy, the crew begins relaxing, life aboard the Nostromo appears ready to continue as normal. But because the audience has already seen what happened, normalcy suddenly becomes uncomfortable. Every conversation feels slightly off. Every moment of calm feels temporary. The film creates an unusual situation where viewers are no longer asking if something bad will happen. They're asking when, and that subtle shift changes the entire experience of Alien. Once the audience knows disaster is inevitable, every quiet moment becomes part of the horror. This is why the famous chestburster scene remains effective even decades after becoming one of the most spoiled moments in cinematic horror history. Almost everyone who watches Alien today already knows it's coming. They know roughly when it happens, they know what emerges, they know the scene's place in film history, yet somehow it still works. The reason is that the horror isn't contained within the reveal itself. The horror exists in the waiting. Alien spends an extraordinary amount of time building anticipation before finally delivering the payoff. The audience watches Kane laughing and eating with the rest of the crew while knowing something is deeply wrong. The characters are enjoying every moment of relief that they can, while the viewers are trapped in a state of anxiety. Every second that passes without incident actually increases the tension because the film is stretching the audience's nerves tighter and tighter. The chestburster isn't frightening simply because of what it is or does, it's frightening because of how long Alien makes you wait for it. The film understands that anticipation can often become more powerful than the payoff itself, and it weaponizes that understanding better than almost any horror film ever made. What's especially interesting is how this approach continues throughout the rest of the film. Once the Xenomorph is loose aboard the Nostromo, Alien still refuses to rush things. Characters spend long stretches searching corridors, checking rooms, crawling through ventilation shafts, and moving through the ship with extreme caution. Modern horror often treats these moments as obstacles standing between the audience and the next scare. Alien treats them as the main event. The tension comes from the possibility of something happening rather than the thing itself. Every hallway scene suddenly feels dangerous because the audience knows the creature could be there. Every dark corner becomes suspicious because the film has trained viewers to expect the worst. And because the Xenomorph isn't constantly appearing on screen, the audience is forced to imagine where it might be lurking. their minds begin filling the empty spaces with possibilities. The film effectively turns the viewer into an active participant in the suspense because their imagination starts doing part of the work. Alien doesn't simply show fear for the audience or to the audience, it encourages them to create fear for themselves. This is also where the film's pacing becomes one of its greatest strengths. Many modern movies are terrified of boredom. They move quickly, cut quickly, and constantly introduce new information because they're afraid audiences will lose interest if things slow down. Alien has no such fear. It understands that slowness can be a weapon when used correctly. Every delay increases uncertainty. Every quiet scene allows anxiety to grow. Every moment spent waiting gives the audience another opportunity to imagine what might happen next. The film trusts viewers enough to sit with that discomfort instead of immediately reliving it. As a result, there is suspense. As a result, the suspense becomes almost suffocating. By the time the horror finally arrives, the audience has already spent so long anticipating disaster that the tension feels overwhelming. That's why Alien remains unsettling even when its surprises are no longer surprising. The film isn't relying on shock, it's relying on anticipation. And anticipation is one of the few forms of horror that never really loses its power, because no matter how many times you watch Alien, the waiting still feels unbearable. What makes Alien feel unsettling all these years later, and will forevermore in cinema history, isn't because of the Xenomorph, the violence, or the famous scenes that audiences will already know by heart. It's the way the film patiently constructs an atmosphere of dread and then refuses to let the audience escape from it. The Nostromo never really feels safe. The pacing constantly encourages viewers to anticipate disaster. The monster remains frightening because the film understands the value of restraint. Every element works together to create an experience where the tension is present long before the horror fully arrives. And that's why Alien continues to endure while so many horror films lose their impact over time. Even when the surprises are no longer surprises, the atmosphere remains intact. The discomfort remains intact. The feeling of waiting for something terrible to happen remains intact. Alien understands that horror isn't always about sudden shocks or unexpected twists. Sometimes the most effective fear comes from being trapped inside a feeling that slowly grows stronger with every passing scene. That's what makes the film memorable, and it's why Alien will always feel unsettling.